A question asked courageously, answered honestly, and lived authentically can change your whole life. For me, that question was, how can I use what I have, what I love, and what I know to bless the lives of others? The School for Good Living and this podcast are one answer to that question. Hi, I'm Brian Miller. I know that the world can work for everyone, but that it won't until it works for you. I've created this to help you make the difference you were born to make. It's a series of conversations with thought leaders who are moving humanity forward. And in each episode, I explore their lives and the work they do. I also ask them to break down how they've gotten their books written, published, and read. This podcast is all about exploring the magic and mystery, and sometimes the misery, of the creative process. So if you have a mission, a message, and the motivation to share it, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the School for Good Living. Welcome back to part 2 of my interview with Chip Conley. Thanks for listening. Your story of going down there, buying the home, renovating, having the epiphany with the run on the beach, it just sounds so magical or divinely inspired. And the fact that I know that many people are looking for this now, obviously you know that too. But one thing that your work has really, given me some new insight into is this idea of what I would say like the downside or the pitfalls related to retirement, and how, somebody once suggested to me that when we retire, assuming we do, that we either retire away from something or toward something, and that it's critically different which it is. And you pointed me to some research that talks about retirement accelerating mortality rates. And will you just talk about what is how do you, because I get what you're saying. There's this thing, adolescence, we're preparing people to live longer, to live better, that kind of thing. But maybe this is how.
So let's first go to the science and the white papers. And what they show is that you do increase your mortality rate if you choose to retire, which is bizarre because in many ways you could think that when retirement was created in the most formal way in the 1930s with Social Security, et cetera, it was created with the idea that actually it was helping people live longer lives because generally people were doing physical labor. And, at some point in your 60s, you wear out. A lot of people wear out. So actually what happens, to get into the science is that 2 or 3 things really happen. Number one is you lose your sense of purpose. I'm talking generally here, or I'm talking about in situations where someone does, die faster because of this. So you lose your sense of purpose because generally work is the number one purpose generator in most people's lives beyond your family. And so, family first, work is second when it comes to your sense of purpose in life. All of a sudden that's gone away and you don't actually necessarily have something in its place, which is a weird thing. We don't really have a cultural way of saying to people with rites of passage in midlife, what's the thing you're moving toward? Secondly, community. This is underappreciated and I think is becoming even more in an era of, mass quarantine, self-quarantines.
I think, and even before that, Chip, sorry to jump in here, but even before that, the fact that I know there's some health, like public health officials that are now moving toward declaring loneliness an epidemic.
Well, in the UK, there's actually a minister of loneliness as of 2018 because of, yes. So tons and tons of evidence on this one as well. So you retire, you lose your sense of purpose. You retire, you lose your sense of community often. And the third one, which is has a little bit less relevance, but it's still moderately relevant, is you lose your discipline and your sense of structure to your life.
Oh, that's huge.
That one can be huge. It sort of varies on the person because the other two actually are more consistent throughout. This one sort of varies a little bit. And why does it vary? Well, some people then, often I would just say, the truth is it's usually all 3. So if someone's missing it on one, they're usually missing it on all 3. And if someone has it on one, they might have it on all 3. Because when you actually have some purpose, community in your post-retirement life, you often have structure. And that's why I think of this one, the structure. I don't think structure just for the sake of structure is going to solve anything.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to watch, for the next 14 hours TV in this structure. I don't think that necessarily solves anything, but but purpose and community can create structure. So I think that that's the third one to be just aware of. And what happens without structure? Frankly, sometimes people fall into behaviors, whether it's drinking or other, or being sedentary, not exercising, etc., that actually work against their health. So, that's the story on retirement. So, I think what we need to do, and especially in an era where people are going to live longer, like it's great to have all this extra longevity, but how the hell am I going to pay for it? And so that means people need to, by choice or necessity, consider that they may live longer. I'm sorry, that they may work longer, and try to find a way to feel positively about that. Because Becca Levy from Yale has shown that if you can have a positive perspective on aging and move from a neutral or a negative perspective, you actually add 7.5 years to your life.
That's amazing.
All things considered.
I mean, that's more years than quitting smoking, isn't it? Even
more than quitting smoking, more than actually taking up exercise in midlife. So
more than being married, which I was surprised to learn can add 5 years to someone's life.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So in some ways, and Becca, we're now, I like, for me, I'm just in seventh heaven, because all these academics who have done great work, but a lot of their work isn't very public. I mean, in the sense that it hasn't hit pop culture. They're sort of excited because, my book's done well, and I do a lot of speaking, and lots of podcasts like this, and so their work's getting out there. And Becca now has just said, "Listen, yeah, I'd love to talk to you about coming to the Modern Elder Academy and teaching, because in many ways we're the first institution in the world that actually has been dedicated to her research, which is basically to say, how do you help people shift their mindset to a positive perspective on aging? We're making aging aspirational."
That's fantastic. And your question too about, what if aging wasn't about growing old, but about growing whole? I just think that's such a fantastic question. And toward the end of your book of Wisdom at Work, when you write that being a modern elder is all about reciprocity, giving and receiving, teaching and learning, speaking and listening, that everyone gets older, but not everyone gets elder. The first just happens if you're lucky and healthy. But this idea is, in some ways, I love that about growing whole. It's a both and a rounding out. There's something about that I can see why that would be something to look forward to. Where previously, if I'm honest, my view of getting old, was decrepitude, decay, breakdown, slowing down, and all of this. Not too long ago, I read something in one of my teachers, Yogananda, actually suggested that it is possible to mature and even reach the point of death while still maintaining complete function in old age. And it was like, it had never even occurred to me, that we could avoid disease. And not that most people, I know many people deal with that, but anyway, it wasn't even a possibility. And your work is really kind of reinforcing that for me. And I'm grateful for it.
Thank you. Well, I think in many ways, society has defined age as having one playing field, not multiple playing fields. And the playing field has been our body and our beauty and our brawn. Let's give all three of those together. And then there's the brain one, another B, but it sort of looked at the brain from the perspective of, memory and quick recall. And what it's missed is that there are other playing fields. There's the playing field of the mind, which is the brain, but also beyond that. And it's sort of like this idea of emotional intelligence that comes from that, and the idea of holistic thinking that gets better with age. And then there's the big one from my perspective, which is the soul, the playing field of the soul. Mm-hmm. And there's yes, there are young people who have old souls. Absolutely. In fact, there are young people who are wise. Absolutely. Wisdom is not just, something that you get when you get older. You actually, as you said just a moment ago, quoting my book, everybody gets older if we're lucky, but some of us get elder. And what that means is you actually cultivate and harvest your wisdom. If wisdom is about pattern recognition, the longer you've been on the planet, the more patterns you've seen and are able to recognize. If you start learning how to cultivate and harvest that pattern recognition or that wisdom, you have more to offer yourself and society. Yeah. And that is really what is core to what we do at the Modern Elder Academy, is help people learn the tools to do that in their life more effectively. And that is why the community around this has grown so rampantly, because there are a lot of people who are thirsty for understanding how do you cultivate and harvest wisdom. And they're all not all, the part that's been surprising, Brian, is I thought it was just going to be, we pretty much said initially, the program is just for people 45 to 65. And that, because that was how we defined midlife. And as you know, what I said earlier today was 35 to 75 is my new definition of midlife. But we've had people from 30 to 88 come to the program. And in fact, 25% of the people who've come are outside of the 45 to 65 window,
Wow.
equally split with those who are younger, like you, and those people who are older than 65, including the 88-year-old who came, who just said, listen, she said, I still have 10 or 15 years ahead of me. I'm not elderly yet. And she's not physically, she's like stunningly in shape.
That's great.
But she was really interested in is how does she cultivate and harvest her wisdom and accelerate that process, because she does see that it's the time of her life when she's leaving her legacy, and how can she do that even more effectively?
Yeah. Well, I know the quality of our lives is directly related to the questions we ask. And these are fantastic questions. And I've been on your website, and in your book, you have some of them as well. But I realize, any one of these questions really asked, with honesty and courage could change the trajectory of our life. So for people who want to experience that, I understand that these are residential programs. So they would actually come down to Baja, spend time at this beautiful, do you call it a resort? This beautiful facility you've created?
No, we call it a retreat, but I mean, we really call it a wisdom school, a midlife wisdom school.
So people can find out about that online at modernelderacademy.com. Is that right?
Yep. .com and .org, because we are a social enterprise. So one of the things that I think people really need to know is, like, for me, I've been lucky enough to be a for-profit entrepreneur and be successful at Joie de Vivre and then with Airbnb. But I totally now in the mode of being a social entrepreneur. So one of the things that's important to me is I think wisdom is not taught, it's shared. And so what we really believe strongly in is the idea of socioeconomic diversity within our cohorts that are usually on average 18 people. And so what that means is that over 50% of the people who come here are on some form of scholarship we give them. So we give about $1.5 million a year in scholarships to people, all of which is funded by us. And what that's great is it means that we've closed for the pandemic for a few weeks for good reason, for public health reasons, and we'll continue to be closed if we have to be. But in our last cohort, we had a union steelworker who's 60 years old.
Wow.
In the cohort, along with a physical therapist, a nurse, an elementary school teacher, and a social worker. But we also had a former CEO of a tech company. We had a best-selling author. We had a software engineer from Silicon Valley. So that diversity is part of what's interesting, because when people are going through transition, we talked about this being, MEA is about navigating midlife transitions. Whether your transition is a career one, or whether it's going through menopause or an empty nest syndrome, or being in the sandwich generation where you have both, you're taking care of your parents later in life, but you're also taking care of your kids, or it's a medical diagnosis or a divorce. There are people going through all kinds of transitions, and there's something common about transition, which is it tends to create anxiety in one's life. And there's some great lessons we can have from each other. So creating a conversation within the cohort of people who are very diverse is part of the reason we really are excited by people who can come, but they normally might think, I can't afford that. Well, you probably can. And in fact, especially in the next few months, if you lose your job because of this economic downturn, as long as you can get yourself down here, we have 3 levels of scholarship of how you could join us.
That is so great. I haven't seen that with any other program quite the way you've structured it. And that's very generous. So good for you. Okay, with your permission, I want to transition our conversation to the enlightening lightning round. But before we do, I want to make sure that if there's anything more right now you want to say about the Modern Elder Academy or anything else, that we get that in here.
I think that's great. I think we're fine.
Awesome. Good. Okay. Are you ready for the enlightening lightning round? Okay.
Go for it.
Question number 1. Please complete the following sentence with something other than a box of chocolates. Life is like a
series of seasons.
Okay. Number 2, borrowing Peter Thiel's famous question, what important truth do very few people agree with you on?
That aging is aspirational.
Okay, thank you. Number 3, if you were required every day for the rest of your life to wear a t-shirt with a slogan on it or a phrase or a saying or a quote or a quip, what would the shirt say?
Grow whole.
I like that. Number 4, what book, other than one of your own, and I understand, Chip, you've written 5 now, or published
Yes.
5, yeah.
Yep.
That's awesome. So what book, other than one of your 5 own books, have you gifted or recommended most often?
Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
That is, by the way, the number 1 most common response to this question from my
Is
guests.
that right? I love it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So thank you.
I think it's a great leadership book, but that's a whole different subject.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, let me just ask this here then, not normally part of the lightning round. What are you currently reading?
I'm reading Michael Mead's Awakening the Soul. But I tend to read 6 or 7 books at once. But I'm rereading Michael Mead's Awakening the Soul because it feels like it's a book that's relevant to the planet right now. And that's why I'm reading that one. What else? There's a book that I've read. I just reread also called The 100-Year Life by a couple of London professors.
I like that. I like that title. By the way, I want to live to be 200. I heard Peter Diamandis say his plan is to live to be 700. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of him. And we were at a summit event and I went, is he for real? And he was. And then he started articulating his plan to do so. And then I was like, okay, I'm not that ambitious, but 200 sounds good. What about you?
Peter may not have height, but he does have length.
Yes.
And certainly depth. I don't, in terms of how long do I want to live? I don't care. You know what? I don't really think about it that way. I think the age that I think I'm going to live till is age 98. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about society, and this again gets back to the aging is aspirational, is if you think about what percentage of your adult life have you lived so far? And if I live till 98 and I'm 59 now, what that means is an 80-year adulthood. And I'm 41 years into that 80-year adulthood, which means I've just entered the second half of my adulthood. Now, most of us don't think that way. And this is part of the reason why people don't try to learn how to surf or learn Spanish in their late 50s, because there's a sense that their fixed mindset, using Carol Dweck's work, means that they're focusing on proving themselves. And as you get older, that means you actually create a smaller and smaller sandbox because you tend to only do things that you think you're going to do well. Whereas when you're improving yourself, which is what a growth mindset is about, you actually tend to be focused on learning, not winning. And therefore, you try new things. And so, I think a growth mindset, which is very woven into our Modern Elder Academy curriculum, will allow you to move into a state of flow. To use, I have something called the Wisdom Well, which is my daily blog that people get subscribed to and get for free. And I did a interesting blog a week ago or so called Mihaly and Carol's Love Child. And it basically took Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's theory of flow, put it into a graph format based upon, he's a friend of mine and he's also known as Mike. Mike showed me the graph that defines flow with challenge and skill on the 2 axes. And then you superimposed on that Carol Dweck's work about how to create a growth mindset, to create a flow channel. You can actually see in a visual way and depict, how do I create a life full of more of a growth mindset that allows me to enter a state of flow more often in my life, especially around things that are new. It's a visual reference. It's fucking dynamite.
That is really cool.
And excuse the F word. But it's really interesting because when people can actually see the visual, they actually take an abstract concept and they actually make it real in their life.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt where having an understanding of something, an awareness of a concept alone can be transformational or open up a possibility. And what you're describing sounds cool. What I wonder is it also available online as like a blog post, or was it only in an email that you sent to?
No, it's online. Yeah, if you go to Wisdom Well, it's probably just searchable online, but it's on the Modern Elder Academy website. At the bottom of the website is where you go, and it has the archive of them all. So you could actually just go there. I'm sure you could go just online and just put my name and just say Mihaly, Mihaly, Mihaly and Carol's love child, and it'll show up.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll be sure to put that in the show notes as well, and the link for anyone who wants to sign up to be sure to receive that every day. Yep. So awesome. Thank you. Okay.
It's a little microdose of wisdom.
That's great. I'm going to ask you about that when we get to the writing section, what your process is for creating that. But okay. So question number 5, you have traveled a ton in your life. What's one, and of course your work has been oriented around travel and hospitality, but what's one travel hack, meaning something you do or something you take with you when you travel to make your travel less painful or more enjoyable?
I'll just say that my favorite thing to do when I get to the place I'm going to is to go for a run, especially if it's a place where I'm going to have jet lag. Especially if it's during the daytime still, I want to, have multiple benefits out of going for a run near where I'm staying. I get to know the neighborhood, which is interesting. I get my body, after being in a plane for a long time, getting some good circulation going. And for the sake of jet lag, it's absolutely been proven that if you need to stay up and be in light if it's daytime, and not just go straight to take a nap. So that's my hack. So it's not something I have to buy. It's just something I do. And then what I try to do whenever I'm feeling tired is I will meditate. I'll meditate instead of taking a nap.
Wow. Any particular form you follow?
I've done all kinds of things. The one I use as sort of my fallback, especially if I'm traveling, is just TM.
Mm-hmm. And you've got your mantra and everything.
Yep.
Right on. That's great. Okay. Thank you for that. Number 6, what's one thing you've started or stopped doing? And I realize there's many probably, but what's one thing you've started or stopped doing in order to live or age well?
I stopped being CEO of Joie de Vivre to age well. I stopped being full-time at Airbnb in order to age well. So what I have found, and both of those were callings of mine. So I felt I've had to actually drop a calling, leave a calling in order to find a new one.
Wow. That reminds me, just a few interviews ago, I interviewed the spiritual teacher, Mark Nepo.
Mark is teaching here next year at Modern Elder Academy.
No way. I want to come.
And I just literally 2 days ago, he wrote something to me for me to share with our Modern Elder Academy community. And it's on the Wisdom Well blog.
Oh my goodness. That's so awesome. Yeah. And what you're sharing now about this, releasing, letting go of these callings that you've had reminds me of something he talks about, which is, the root of the word sacrifice is the same root as sacred. And to sacrifice something is what allows us to remain close to the pulse of life and that which is sacred. And I was like, that is such a beautiful perspective. And it sounds like that's exactly what you've done.
Yes. I think that I love him. So yes.
That's great. Awesome. Okay. Number 7, what's one thing you wish every American knew?
How to get a passport?
They don't know that already?
No. Listen, no, they don't.
Yeah, that impacts you being in Mexico, doesn't it?
Well, it just impacts, I think, so much in the world today in terms of how we balkanize people who are different than us.
Yeah. You mean it doesn't work just to speak louder once you get to the customs or something? No. Okay. Number 8, what is something you have learned about making relationships work that has served you well?
I'm not a huge fan of Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but there are a couple things in it that I really found valuable.
Okay, hold on, just real quick. How come you're not a fan of that? Doesn't everybody just love that book?
No.
Why not?
I found much of it very dry and somewhat obvious. But I think that one of the things that I really appreciated was seek to first understand.
Yes.
And I think that's, to answer your question, I think it's really valuable advice, especially when it's somebody who has got a different point of view than you.
Yeah. Maybe even especially then, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. And coming down the stretch here, the next one is about money. So aside from compound interest, what is something important that you've learned about money, or what's something that you're sure to always do or to never do with it?
So I think the number one question that anybody should ask themselves is if you needed to go to therapy, relationship therapy with money, because you have a lifelong relationship with money, what would you say to the therapist about money, and what would money say about you? The premise there being, money, you have a relationship with money, and yet our money relationship is somewhat unconscious, and it's a script that we learned a long time ago that may no longer serve us. And so the question I often ask myself is money creating freedom in my life, or is it taking it away?
Wow, that is a deep question. That's great. Okay, awesome. So with this last question, you will have survived the enlightening lightning round. Congratulations.
Yay.
And this
Yay.
one's a softball. If people want to learn more from you or they want to connect with you, what would you have them do?
I think probably, certainly you could go and look for me in social media, or my URL of chipconley.com.
Where are
But I
you
do think,
active? Twitter,
yeah,
Instagram?
I'm most active on LinkedIn. Interesting. Twitter a little bit, Facebook a little bit. Our Modern Elder Academy Facebook group, which is a private group which anybody can join, is a really great, robust group. But I think my Wisdom Well daily blog is the best way to sort of have a pulse, my thinking, my way of framing life and understanding how to create a good life. And it's generally pretty topical. So of course, a lot of the posts right now are about the virus. And yet I also have guest bloggers like, Mark Nepo, who just blogged, and Seth Godin and I did a series of 8 back and forth a couple months ago. And so it's, I think, a good way for people to get to know what I'm doing.
That's great. Thank you for that. Okay. And as an expression of gratitude to you, I have gone on kiva.org and I've made a $100 microloan to a 45-year-old entrepreneur named Johnny, who is in India, who will use this money. She's actually going to use this to make bamboo products like baskets and chairs that she can sell to improve the quality of life in her community and for herself and her family. So thank you for giving me a reason to make that microloan.
Wow, I love that. That is really genius. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, that's my pleasure. Okay, so the final questions here, and how you doing, by the way?
I'm great.
Good. Okay. The last portion of our interview, really coming down the stretch on the interview itself, this is a place to explore writing, creativity, perhaps even maybe marketing and promotion, just recognizing many people who want to write a book see the completion of a manuscript or the publication as the finish line, where ultimately, although that is significant, I think they're probably not as fulfilled if people don't know about it, care about it, pick it up. So what you've learned, I suspect, would be really valuable to people listening. And there's so much we could say, but we could start anywhere. But I am interested in your creative process for the Wisdom Well. You said that it's a daily blog. And what I love in that is that for any creative, right? Like as Jobs said, real artists ship. And clearly you've done that by publishing 5 books, multiple TED Talks. You have this daily blog. Will you tell us, how do you organize your time and what's your creative and productive process like?
Sure. I think it's so essential to know what's the right habitat, and the habitat can also include time of day. I've known for a very long time that my writer wakes up before my editor. And what that basically means is that my creative process is so much better early in the day, because they're fresh thoughts that don't have the critical thinking editing them. And so my ideal time for writing is about 4:30 in the morning till 7:30 in the morning.
Holy
So
crap.
I think I was a monk or a farmer in a past life. Yeah, it is a holy crap. Actually, I take the holy crap first and then I start writing. So what I do is I know that that's the time of day where I'm most, the thin veil between me and something bigger than me is at its thinnest. William Blake, the writer, long ago said that there's certain places in life where he just takes dictation. That's sort of how it is for me.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'm taking dictation if I'm getting it right. Something is channeling through me. And I know that meditating early in the morning helps me as well. I know that a run on the beach is a great way to help me with that, help me at any time of day to get a download. But I also know that I really like to do a lot of writing simultaneously. So if I'm going to sit down for 3 hours of writing in a row and I'm going to be writing Wisdom Well daily blogs, I might write 4 or 5 over that course of time, which means that I'm not having to churn out every single day, a blog. But it does mean that I have to insert new ones. If I have something topical that needs to go in tomorrow's blog, it might just slide right in there because it's something that needs to get out there immediately because it relates to something that's happening topically in society at that particular moment. Now, when I'm writing a book, it's a little different approach because I'm not the maker who then actually has to be the producer immediately. When you're writing a book, it's like a pregnancy for me. Every book I've written except for the last one, it took 9 months, almost within a month of 9 months on either side, 8 to 10 months. This last book was Wisdom Well took 5. And when I say took that long, I mean, not from the moment I had the idea, I mean, from the moment I have gotten the idea to the place I'm ready to start writing. Now that in some cases for me now, back in the early days, it meant I needed to go write it before I could sell it. Now it means I've gone out and written the proposal to a publisher with my literary agent and I've sold the book and now I've got a signed contract and now it gets started. So that process still is very much morning driven, fresh ideas first thing in the morning. But I tend to, as you sort of talked about it earlier, I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to writing a book. My last 3 books, they're basically absolutely psychology meets business. All 5 of them are, but the last 3 in particular. So I go out and I just become a voracious reader. And so I'm reading during the day. I usually do my reading in the afternoon and the evening. I do my writing in the morning. And so I am processing through things and I'm using Google Docs like you couldn't believe, such that, and in the old days, I had files. I'd photocopy pieces of books that I just wanted to remember, and then I just put that in a file, and I'd have as many as 500 files.
Physical files.
Physical file folders for different components of the book. And so then I weave it all together ultimately, and I write all my own stuff. I do have a personal editor who she comes along late in the game. Actually, she actually reads things along the way. And I actually like to write. And then once I've gotten maybe 3 chapters done, let's say it's a 12 chapter book. Once I've gotten about a quarter of the book done, I like to have my editor at the publisher read it. So I will have my personal editor who is I pay, out of my advance, have her, polish it a little bit, and then it'll go to the publisher to make sure I'm on the right path. Because the worst thing that I don't know how writers write a whole book without having their editor see any of it. I get the intent, but I would be scared along the way, and I'd start. Then my editor kicks in a big way. So I'd rather feel free to have the creative freedom to keep going. And I feel like I have the responsibility with the publisher to make sure that I'm on the right path.
Yeah. Let me jump and ask you about the editor there for a moment, because I know that editing can mean a lot of things, all the way from proofreading and copy editing, line editing, to the structural and conceptual editing and that kind of thing. And I know, like you talk about making sure that you're on the path you want to be, but your editor comes into the process later in the game. What's your process for structuring the book? Like, how do you go from the concept and you're sure I want to write a book about this thing, and then you form it and shape it so that when all that writing hangs in that framework? How do you approach that?
It's interesting. It's been fascinating to see how the structures of my books, that's actually where the editor at the publisher is helpful. And I think that's really pretty important, because if your editor at the publisher doesn't like your structure, oh my God, wow, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important first thing. And if you're doing this right with the publisher, you've given them, maybe even a sample chapter or 2, but certainly a proposed table of contents, so they understand the sort of flow of the book. And then once you've done the flow of the book, what I tend to do, and let's say I've gotten a signed contract now, is I will then create between 1 and 4 paragraphs per chapter to sort of to go into detail about what the chapter is more about. Now, in some cases, I've actually done that even in the book proposal process. And that's the key is like, if I think it's important that the publishers got that structure down. Now with my last book, interestingly enough, Wisdom at Work, Making of a Modern Elder, I sold the book to Penguin Random House, and the book was called Modern Elder, but didn't have a subtitle. 4 months into it, while I was already writing the book, they came back and said, it's no longer going to be called Modern Elder. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like and they have the rights, to do whatever they want there. And I was like, that's the idea. But they were really scared about all the stuff we've talked about, which is like people will not gravitate to it. They don't get it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why ultimately it became the subtitle. But I have so many people who say to me, I've read your book, The Making of a Modern Elder. It's really good. It's like, well, that's the subtitle of the book.
But that's what they remember.
Wisdom at Work is what it's called. But I also have 2 or 3 people who are sort of friends who are writers and muses, and I will work with them sometimes and just sort of like throw things around with them. And then in certain cases, if it's a book that has a specialty, like a focus, like the book on Maslow, which is called Peak, How Great Companies Get Their Mojo from Maslow, about Maslow's hierarchy of needs applied to organizations. I worked with some people who really are just brilliant about Maslow's work. And while I was applying it to a world that they weren't as familiar with, which was the organizational and business world, I really got some good advice from them about structure there, because actually I was even structuring what a hierarchy of needs pyramid looked like for employees, customers, and investors. And so I the thing that I'm very proud of, I mean, there's lots of things I'm not good at, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm really proud. I've written some books that have an element of a scholarly academic element to them. They're well read. Usually I read, on average about 100 books in preparation for writing a book. And I have yet in these last 3 books to have anybody, or any of my 5 books ever, anybody from the academic world take me to task and say, you
misconstrued.
Poser. Or you poser. You've come along and like, I've spent my life, studying, Maslow or Viktor Frankl or Carl Jung or a bunch of other people or gerontology.
Yeah.
And here you come along as the interloper. And I've never had that experience. And truly, the academic world can be pretty petty about that kind of stuff. And so I'm proud of that. And I think what it does say is that I do research the subjects pretty deeply.
Yeah. Well, and that, clearly that shines through. And that's one thing I think that works so well about your writing. And it did for me, particularly in this book, Wisdom at Work, where I found it such a fantastic blend of science and the academic, research, as well as stories, from people that personally, people you've worked with, people that you know of, and then your own experience. And so it's very readable, it's very engaging. And that's one thing I want to ask about is, what was your process like for knowing, because if you have this big picture of what the book is, and then you're out researching and collecting and even writing a story, and you've got hundreds of these, I would think, how do you know where they're all going to fit? Did you tag them? Did you use sticky note? Like, how did you approach and organize all that?
Yeah. I've done sticky notes before. For some reason that doesn't work as much for me. What I used to do is I would, again, I'd have this file folder and there'd be 500 of them, and I'd have maybe 15 chapters in the book, that particular book. And so I'd take the 500 file folders and turn them into, 30 file folders per chapter, the themes in the chapter. And then I'd literally, stack the folders in the right order. And that's how I do it. But then there was the process of writing it and then actually polishing it and feeling like, okay, there's got to be the right kind of flow. I actually, interestingly, on the last book, one of my chapters, the longest chapter in my book, chapter 8, was way, way too long. It was 46 pages long, and I don't like chapters that are more than 20 pages long. And I love a 12-page, 15-page chapter if possible. But generally my chapters tend to be, closer to 20. This is 46 pages long, and with my editor, and that was after the edit with my personal editor. With the editor at the publisher, they got it down to 40. But at the last minute, I just went in and just said, no, I can't do this. 40 pages is too long. So I don't remember what it got down to, but I think it got down to 34 pages to 32 pages. And I just slashed stuff at the last minute. And it is really hard to slash stuff if you're a writer who has labored over the process as much as I do to get to that place. If, and you think you have some gems there and you have information that won't be in the light of day. And, so ultimately with the last book, with Wisdom at Work, I ended up having an appendix where I put some of the stuff, and sometimes it was not in long passages, but it was links and things like that to things that I thought were pretty relevant to the book overall. And in some cases, they were just pieces of beautiful wisdom and prose that I wanted to quote of somebody that was, 200 words of prose that I felt like I don't have the space to do 200 words of prose, and I want to put it in the appendix.
Yeah, that's so valuable. And at first I thought you were going to say 46 pages, no problem, 2 chapters, but not that.
That was a possibility, but it was thematically hard. That's what my editor at the publisher said, and I just said no. It's thematically, this is one chapter. It just needs to be ultimately. So I ultimately went from about, let's say, 46 to 34 pages or 32 pages. So that was a pretty major streamlining after my personal editor had gotten it to 46.
Yeah. I love what you did with putting all that in the appendix because, I know I found it valuable and I suspect many others have as well. And it brings to mind something I've heard Maria Popova of Brain Picking say, that literature was the original internet, and you're providing these links to other thinkers and resources. So that's valuable. Okay, cool. Well, I've pushed us to our time here. If I may just end with 2 questions. One is about promotion. What have you learned about marketing and promoting books that has served you well that might also serve people listening?
I think the thing that people need to know about marketing and selling books is it is very different than it used to be. Getting a mention in Time magazine doesn't matter anymore, really. Being on Tim Ferriss matters a lot, Tim Ferriss's podcast. So know that the more digital the format and the more your link or your name is a link, the more likely people are going to buy in the moment. And so whether that's in the podcast or in the blogger sphere, it means, doing marketing to people who specialize in your area, in the subject of your book, who may become your champions to their communities. And sometimes it's going to be small operators, small podcasters, small bloggers. And I mean, if you're somebody who doesn't have a huge history and you're trying to get started, I wouldn't just say, okay, I want to get on Tim Ferriss. Like, good luck. You also want to be on the big TED stage,
which you have done both of those, by the way. It's worth just calling out. I know you're humble on that, but you've been.
Yeah, I have. But I mean, like, wow, God, it doesn't happen easily, and I've done both twice now. And so it's an interesting thing. It's not something that's, I think disappointment equals expectations minus reality. Don't have the expectation of that. Yeah. The other thought I have is just build your own community, build your own, they call it platform. And it's really usually through social media, or through an mailing list. These are the people who are, your greatest fans and people who really care about you, and they're more likely to buy your book.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I know the whole discussion about how to build a platform could be its own interview. So clearly we won't get into that now. But thanks for affirming, what people probably know, but maybe don't want to admit. Yeah. And I'll just say, I was fortunate to have a conversation with Ryan Holiday about the manuscript.
I love Ryan.
Yeah, he's amazing. And I asked him if he'd help me get my book done and out. And he just said, Brian, build your platform, then come back and talk to me again. So what you're saying, it certainly resonates with me. And for people listening, if you're serious about serving people, extending your reach and impact, this platform thing is a real thing. So thank you for that. Okay, final thing is, what are the final words that you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the wisdom I'd like to leave is the fact that you have a lot more life ahead of you than you think you have, and you have a lot more change ahead of you than you think you have. There's a pretty famous TED Talk by, I believe it's Dan Gilbert, that showed that for every single age cohort from age 20 to 80, people mistakenly underestimated how much change they have ahead of them in the next 10 years. So in essence, everybody thinks that they are in a solid state of where they are today and that change is not coming. And this is true at every age level. So just know change is happening. Learn what the word liminal means, which means that you're in between two things. It's a place of when you feel awkward. But of course, if you talk about the caterpillar to butterfly journey, the liminal stage of being in the cocoon is just before the beauty arises.
Mm-hmm. That is so fantastic. And by the way, the video you have in your TED Talk of the butterfly transforming is really gorgeous.
Thank you very much.
So, all right. Well, thank you for that. And thank you to everyone listening. I hope that you, if you haven't already acquainted yourself with Chip's work, that you do so. And maybe I will see you in Baja at the Modern Elder Academy. Until next time, take care, everybody. Despite living in an age where we have more comforts and conveniences than ever before, life isn't working for many people. Whether it's in the developed world, where we're dealing with depression, anxiety, addiction, divorce, jobs we hate, relationships that don't work, or people in the developing world who don't have access to clean water or sanitation or healthcare or education, or who live in conflict zones, there's a lot of people on the planet that life isn't working very well for. If you're one of those people, I invite you to connect with me at goodliving.com. I've created Life's Best Practices Breakthrough Coaching to help you navigate the transitions that we all go through. Whether you've just graduated school, you're going through a divorce, you just got married, you're headed into retirement, you're starting a business, you just lost your job, whatever it is you're facing, I've developed a 36-week course that you go through with me and a community of achievers and seekers who are committed to improving their own lives and the lives of others. So through this online program, you will have the opportunity to go deep into every area of your life, explore life's big questions, create answers for yourself in community, get clarity and accountability. If that's something you're interested to learn about, I invite you to contact me directly at brian@brianmiller.com or by visiting goodliving.com.